Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Edward Ornelas. In today's video, we're going to be covering the app directory and how you can route your pages inside of this, the Next.js 13.3. As we start to get more and more updates with Next.js, I think it becomes more increasingly important to start understanding the new app directory and how things are rendered inside of this. For me, this is something that I forced myself to learn about a month and a half ago now, and I have been using it a little bit more comfortably for my projects, okay? For those of you that aren't aware what the new app directory is, essentially it's just the way that we nest pages inside of I guess how we route our pages inside of our app directory, right? So essentially, here's a quick overview of how things work. Where previously, we were using what's known as the source file as src file. Now we're using what's called the app directory. And so inside the app, you're going to have what's known as the layout, which is going to essentially be the folder that takes control of the entire project. Next to that is the page, which this would actually now be your home page. And now inside of that, you can create folders within a folder, right? Again, we'll get into some detail as we actually start the project. But inside of that, now we can create a folder called About and then open a new page essentially. And that now creates the About page, okay? And so this will make sense as we start our new project. So in order to do that, let's head on over to the main menu, I guess, if you can call that. And let's just hit the Get Started button. And now all we simply have to do is just copy one of these. So in this case, I'll copy the pnpm create next app. Honestly, actually, let's assume you're just now starting out. So let's say npx create next app latest, okay? And let's open up our terminal. I already have the directory on where I want to install this project. So let's go ahead and paste that in here. So let's say Control V, npx create next app latest. And this might take a few minutes. So depending on your internet speeds, it's telling me, do you want to continue with the new 13.3? I'm just going to simply, you can either hit enter or hit Y. It'll basically say yes. In this case, I'm just going to say next underscore example, just like that. It's asking us if you want to use TypeScript. As of now, I would say yes, just because TypeScript is now becoming the new norm, right? You want to make sure everything is quote unquote type safe. It's asking us for ESLint. I say yes. I would love Tailwind CSS. I'm actually glad that they added this with the new update because I use Tailwind for pretty much all of my projects. I don't use vanilla CSS pretty much anymore. And it's asking us now if we want to use the src, the source directory. This is actually where we say no, because we want to use the app directory, right? So it's still saying the experimental app directory. So we want to say yes for this one. Import alias at is just fine. And so now it's going to be installing all of the dependencies, right? So our TypeScript, our Tailwind, Post CSS, ESLint, React DOM, all the fun stuff, right? And so this might take a few minutes. And once we're done, we'll make sure to open it up, all right? All right, so now it's done. And so in order to open up your project, just hit code dot. It should take us to VS Code now, and it should open us up to the new project, right? So this is not it. Let's go over to where it says next example. All right, so here's our project, right? As you can see. We'll just hit install for that. I'm not sure what that's doing. Sure. Okay, let's go back here. Anyways, ignore what just happened there. And it's actually open up our terminal really quickly. And we want to make sure that we cd into our project, which is example, I believe it's next underscore example, right? So make sure that this is routed the same way. So there we are. And now we just simply have to say npm run dev. Okay, and it should open up. Now we just have to simply hold control and then click on that. And it'll take us to our localhost 3000, right? Which is the local server for this project. So just get a few minutes. My computer might be a little slower than yours. And yeah, there we go. Now we have our Next.js project opened up. And so you can see that they already have preloaded a few things on here. not really important, but for the sake of this video, we're just going to leave this in here and I'll explain why, right? So we can go ahead and close out this terminal. Make sure not to leave the server on, right? So you want to leave that on. We're just simply going to close this little tab right there. And again, this right here where it says next_example, this is our folder, right? So all of the contents inside of this, that's our project. And if we open up our app directory, that's where we're going to find all of the new features, right? And notice how usually in the older Next.js 12 projects, you would have a pages folder on here. That's no longer needed now because even your APIs are going to be done all inside of the app directory as well. So that's something that's new about this new update. If we click on the layout, so this is going to be the project that supersedes all of the entire project. And we'll talk about that in a sec because all of your children will be rendered through the layout folder. And below that is your page. And your page is actually going to be your home page, right? So notice how that is what's rendering everything out right here, right? So let's look for the get started by blah blah Vercel. So we can go ahead and actually delete all of this. So I'm actually going to do that right now. If we hit Control Save, you can see it's all gone now. And let's actually open up a H1 tag in here. And let's say home. And this will all make sense in 1 second, okay? And let's open up a class name. We're going to make that text really large just for us to see. So let's say like 7XL. Let's make the font super bold, right? So we can say bold or black. And we're going to make sure that text is visible with a black background. So we're going to say text white. And now you can see it says home page, right? So essentially our home is going to be when you load into your website, that's going to be the first page that loads up. And now, so in order to create, let's say for example, an about page, how do you do that now, right? Before, again, you used to have the pages directory. You would simply create a new folder, right? And you would call it about page, right? .tsx or whatever. Now you no longer do that. So in order to create a new page inside of this 13.3, what you need to do is actually create a new folder inside of the app where it says app. And let's say, let's call this one about, right? So now we created a folder inside of that. And inside of our about, now we simply create another page.tsx, okay? So notice how in our main folder, on the first layer of the app directory, we have a page.tsx, and inside of the app about, we also have a page.tsx. So that is something that's different about the new 13.3, or I guess Next.js 13, is how they're routing pages inside of pages, right? And what we can actually end up doing is hitting Control A, copying all of this. Let's actually paste this over here. And let's rename this one to about, right? So our function about. And now if we say about page, okay, hit Control Save, right, to make sure that we save that. We go back. So notice nothing was rendered inside of that. But now if we hit the slash about, right, inside of our URL, it'll now render the about page just like that. See? And so that's how now you create different pages in the Next.js 13. And so just so you can show you that this is rendering a new page, we can just go ahead and also say this is the about page. Here's, a little about me. So you can see now it should be updated down here. And now again, if we take this out and we just go back to our home, it takes us back to the home page just like that. And so if we actually take a step backwards, and if you remember that layout page, remember how I told you that the layout is the one that supersedes the entire project? Well, here's why. Now, because we're rendering the children inside, and the children is what's going to be the page, the about section, and pretty much anything you put inside of the folders. That's going to be your children. So this is going to be the overlooming project that controls the entire thing. So if we say, for example, let's say for example, we want to give this a nav bar, right? Nav bars or navigations are how you're able to render, or I'm sorry, how you're able to navigate to different pages in the in your website essentially, right? And let's say for example, we want to give this a link. So let's give that a link. Let's import our link, right? So let's say import from next link, right? So if you're not familiar, next link is basically the way that we would essentially create URL tags, I believe, basically to link between all of sites, right? So it's rendering dynamically, not dynamically. So it's using our server-side rendering, and it makes, basically you're able to, instead of refreshing the page every single time with the A tags, the link tags just simply takes you to that URL without having to basically take more reloading, right? So it gives you that seamless app-like feel, right? So let's give the first one to be href, and this one's going to be our home, right? Let's do a second one. Let's say import link. Okay, we said import link. What's happening here? One sec. So it looks like we're getting a little bit of an error. Boolean is not assignable to this. Okay. Unless we say, I guess for now we could say this is the, let's say href. Interesting. Okay. So I guess for now this would work, right? And so now we have a clickable A link. Let's copy that over and let's make this into our about. So let's say about, and we're going to give this an about URL. And make sure, and we're going to actually give this a class and give it a flex. And then we're going to give this a gap of 4. That way it's separated, right? So it gives us some space in between. And now we can even say justify center, right? And we're going to give the text a little bit of some bigger width, a padding of 4. A PY padding, right? So the top and bottom, right? And we're even going to say if it hovers over the text, we're going to make that slate, and we're going to give that a slight color of 300. So, right? So it's not perfect, but you get the idea, right? So this is essentially like your nav bar. And what's going to be funny now, so now we can route ourselves to the home page, right? So here's our home page. And now if we go over to our about page, notice the navigation bar is still remaining on both of our pages, okay? And that is, again, because the layout page inside of our app directory is rendered across all pages and folders, and it supersedes the entire project. Check 1, 2. Okay, I don't know what happened there. Okay, so I'm just going to rewind a little bit quickly. But yeah, so basically, long story short, layout page is always going to supersede the entire project. And this is whatever we affect here is going to affect everything across the board. And so this essentially now, the layout folder is what used to be, if we actually go over to Next.js 12, let's look at quickly how everything was routed, right? So if you guys remember with Next.js 12, we used to use, I'm so sorry guys, let me, give 1 second. Okay, yeah, so here's a good example, right? I don't know if you guys can see this all right. So let me, I can even zoom in a little bit, maybe. Long story short, so when Next.js 13, we have our pages folder, and then we had other folders down here. But notice inside the pages, we had our index, and then we had our app, and then our documents.tx. Well, essentially now that's probably the best way to look at this. Long story short, layout is now both your index and which is the page folder, and then layout is going to be your other one, right? Which is going to be the I guess I exit out of it. And so now everything you do here is how you're going to render pretty much everything and affect the entire page. So that's essentially how you're going to create new pages inside of the Next.js 13.3 app. It's just by simply now adding folders under the app directory and then adding a page.tsx or .js, JSX, whatever it is you're using, right? So you can do this a few times now. So we can say about, let's say a contact form. So you add a contact folder right here. Let's open this up a little bit more. Inside the contact, we can say page.tsx, just like that. We can go ahead and copy this entire thing right here. Paste that over to our contact form. Contact. All right, and just like that. So, and then we can go over to our layout folder. And here, let's copy this quote unquote Navbar, and let's call this one contact, and simply just rename the A tag. And if we go back over to our project, you can see now we have a contact added to this, and we click on that, it's going to take us to the /contact page. Something else to know is that with the new 13.3 update, they added a file-based metadata API, right? So now you can export both dynamic and statically rendered metadata, essentially, right? SEO, which is really cool, especially if you're doing blogs. This is actually something I integrated recently. One of my recent projects was because Bitcoin, they have a blog page. This is a whole entire website for crypto-based projects, and they were needing dynamic metadata because obviously as they upload new projects, they are upload new blogs, that has to be shared across different social medias, right? So if we actually go over to, let's say, for example, as you guys can see right here, our Discord, you can see when I paste that URL link, it renders out the title of the blog as well as a description and the image from that specific blog. And then when we head over to the home page, it's going to now render out the title of the website and a quick description about the website itself rather than the blog itself or the article. And that is essentially how dynamically rendered metadata works. And we can do a quick example of that, right? So right now we have our metadata inside of our layout folder, but what we could actually end up doing is just copy this, and let's actually take that out. And we can even paste that over onto our page for this is for our index folder, right? So we can say title home page, right? And we can say generated by create next app. Okay, whatever. So if you say go over here, notice how the page, it says home page. And if we go over to our, let's say about page, and we paste that in there as well. And now we say this is going to be our about page, right? So now realistically, right? So we're on the home page. When we click on this, now the metadata should change to about page. And I think that is pretty dang cool because now you don't have to render metadata through the HTML down here and have to consistently update it for every page. And it was kind of a pain in the ass, if I'm honest. So now for us to be able to just simply export it through their new update, right? What does it call it? Dynamically generated site routes, robots, favicons, etc. This makes it a lot easier, especially for dynamic websites, okay? And which we can get into an example later on how you can render dynamic content with the metadata page and stuff like that. But for now, you guys get a pretty good idea of how the new Next.js 13.3, at least the app directory, works. And I hope this helps you a ton, because it took me a little bit to figure out how they were routing pages on this new update. And so now that I have a good understanding, it's actually grown on me quite a bit. And I think that this right now is probably the best way to create projects, right? Using this new app directory. And while it is experimental, I think that right now it's very stable for you to use on real projects, really. I do think so, right? So the fact that you can do all of it under this little umbrella right here, I think is very powerful. And if you're wondering, well, how do I also render out my components? Well, that's actually no different than it was before. I think you can probably do it inside of the app directory. I don't recommend it, but in the main folder, I guess, the next example, you can just simply create the components folder just like that, like the way you would before in React or even Next.js 12 or whatever, right? So something that's very familiar. And now you can just simply name whatever components you would like. When it comes to components, you want to make sure that you capitalize the first letter, right? So if you say something along the lines of like header, right? You want to make sure that the header is capitalized. And then now you can create your components there, right? So if we actually go over to Tailwind really quickly, let's say Tailwind components, right? I know Tailwind has some, and I'll just copy. It's not my favorite. Hold up. Okay, never mind. So long story short, you can essentially create a component just like this, like the way you would before. Let's say, for example, this is a header component. You make sure to save that. We go over to our home page. Let's say, for example, we want to import this onto here. You simply just say header with a capital. You import that from our components, and we close that tag. If we go back over to our project, you can see that now, boom, header component. It was imported onto our main page, right? And what's pretty cool about this too is that it also can be imported on the main layout folder as well, right? So if you have your children, again, you can now import components inside of here as well. So if you say header, just like that, import the component from its root. Let's go ahead and delete the previous one, right? So make sure we delete that. And now if we go over to our layout folder, right? So hold that. See, it's gone. But now if we hit the home page again, it should be down here actually. All right, there it is. Header components. I can probably even move that upwards, right? So if we copy that, let's paste that above our children, right? So it should be up, right? So you guys can see it up here a little bit better. And that now will be available across all the different pages, right? So if we're in our contact folder, that component's still there. About, that component's still there, so forth and so on, right? So even inside of our layout folder, you can now import components and they'll be available in all of the entire project as a whole, right? So yeah, so components pretty much remain unchanged, but what's really cool about it now is that they are able to be rendered on either the layout folder or individual pages that you create. So hope you guys got something big out of this. Personally, I think I'm really excited with the new Next.js 13. I'm going to be creating more projects and hopefully more tutorials to be more consistent about this. I think there's a lot that can be explored here, and I'm going to be using that across all of my projects. So if you guys have any questions below, please be sure to ask them, and hopefully I can probably help you guys out. I've created an entire project, a whole blog, newsletter, article. I've added authentications, payment solution, all this with this new update. So I have a little bit of experience, and I'm hoping to get more out of this. So if you guys enjoy this content, please be sure to like, subscribe, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.